Members, any other questions for Mr. Clancy? I believe that Dan Greenburg is actually wanted to speak in conjunction with your testimony. So if you will, you might just stand by. There may still be a question for you. But Dan, if you'd like to come and speak, introduce yourself and who you represent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. My name is Dan Greenburg with the Advance Arkansas Institute. Y'all may have heard me occasionally speak at other committees taking kind of a conservative line or conservative point of view. I'm not going to do that today because this question of what kind of exchange that the state government ought to choose is not really a conservative or liberal question at all. It's an extremely managerial or technical or practical question. And I'd like to say just a little bit about the difficulties that any exchange is going to face in terms of getting established and getting up and running. Every single client that comes into an exchange is going to have to answer the following questions. Is the applicant an American citizen, an Arkansas resident? Name the current household income, figure out whether that income makes the applicant eligible to use the exchange, look at everyone else's income in the family, and figure out which other family member's income ought to be counted for eligibility. You have to determine whether the income makes the applicant a candidate for Medicaid, whether there are special circumstances, such as a disability or pregnancy, outside of income that make for Medicaid candidacy, whether the applicant is employed, and if so, whether that employment creates eligibility for health care coverage, and in particular, whether, in the case of employer eligibility, whether that employment insurance passes the test of adequacy and affordability that the federal government has specified. Now, you answer those questions and you get entered into the exchange, and that's just a prelude to the central task of the exchange, which is to regulate and certify insurance plans. Now, what's going to happen to answer all those questions for one person? It's going to take a little time. When you multiply it by 250,000 or 300,000 Arkansans who get into the exchange, that's going to take a lot more time. And you have to add that to probably another 200,000 or 300,000 Arkansans who will likely apply but fail to qualify. I'm guessing that this administrative burden of making this exchange run in about 6 months from now is going to be very large and very difficult.
Amen.
So what I want to suggest to you is that y'all might want to think about the easiest way to accomplish this gigantic bureaucratic task. In particular, consider the possibility that the estimates of getting this accomplished are overly optimistic in terms of price. And so when you think about engineering this, the task of integrating all these data sets for all these different people in terms of personal income and household tax and payroll information, citizenship status, and employer health care plans, it's going to be difficult to get this thing to roll out successfully. So I want y'all, if you might, to imagine what's going to happen if something goes wrong. Because it's possible that 2 or 3 people might be dissatisfied with the way they're treated in structured bureaucracy. It's possible that a lot more than 2 or 3 people might be dissatisfied with the way they're being treated. So it seems to me you could either have a state exchange or a federal exchange or a hybrid exchange. And I think there's a huge political difficulty with a hybrid exchange that's composed partially of state employees and partially of federal employees. Because what happens at that point, conceivably, is that if you have any constituent difficulties with, say, 500,000 people being involved in this exchange one way or the other, you're going to have the state employees pointing fingers at the federal employees. You're going to have the federal employees pointing fingers at the state employees. And so I think, respectfully, a hybrid exchange is really a disaster waiting to happen. This suggests to me that purely in terms of public satisfaction, a state exchange or a federal exchange is the way to go. You just suggested, I think correctly, that for reasons of economy, given that we have this burden placed on us by federal law, for reasons of economy, there's a very strong argument for a federal exchange. With a state exchange, we're going to have, as you said, a continuing obligation to pay for this over a long time. And furthermore, the hybrid exchange appears to carry with it a large fee, something like a 6% premium fee that does not appear to be entailed by other types of exchanges. And so I think that there are very strong arguments that suggest that avoiding a hybrid exchange is something y'all ought to give serious consideration to. And I think there are also very strong arguments that avoiding a state exchange for reasons of the continuing expense is something y'all ought to give consideration to. So, having said that, I'd be happy to take questions, and I thank you for your time.
Members, I believe Senator Chesterfield has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for taking my question, as I'm not a member of the committee. Mr. Greenburg, good afternoon. Every year, as a matter of fact, every day, people are signed up for Medicare and Medicaid, and they are asked those very same questions. Have you seen anyone unable to get Medicare or Medicaid because of those questions? Or has that not created an opportunity for this state and this nation to know how to deal with its citizens who have varying socioeconomic needs?
Well, respectfully, I think it is fair to say that the bureaucratic burdens involved in enrollment in the exchange are going to be very different, because you have to look at all sorts of, not just personal data, but also family data and employer data, which I think are qualitatively different from the bureaucratic difficulties we have with the current programs, which, by and large, in my prediction, by and large, the creation of this new program is going to make the way those programs run very rosy. Okay, I mean, I think that there's a
significant... How many folks right now, Mr. Greenberg, to your knowledge, because I don't really know, are enrolled in both ARKids A and ARKids B, and all of it depends on family income and all this stuff and the various levels? About how many folks are we currently serving, or perhaps somebody can tell me, in those two programs, or do you know?
I wouldn't be able to answer that off the top of my head, but I mean, respectfully, if I could at some point, I'd like to show you a chart of the new types of information that are going to be created that will necessitate, or that will be necessitated by an exchange. And I do think that it is, I mean, there's every reason to believe that this is qualitatively different in terms of engineering and setting up this program.
Thank you, Senator Chesterfield. Senator Elliott.
I was not going to ask, but you kind of put a scare thing up there in my heart, so I need you to get it believed. I was just thinking about, well, I guess first of all, what's your experience with integrating and aggregating large bundles of data the way we're talking about? What's your expertise in that area? To know that it's going to be insurmountable, almost.
Respectfully, I mean, if you're asking me to endorse the notion that it's going to be insurmountable, I would not endorse that. I do think that this is an unprecedented type of program that involves correlation and connection of different types of data. If you want to ask me what my own experience is in IT, I can't answer that question in a positive way. I can tell you I've certainly talked to many people in the IT field that think it's going to be a very large challenge.
But that's fair enough that you've talked to other people. But I was just trying, and I probably should not have said insurmountable, I'll give you that. But how you're convinced that it's so much of a challenge that we probably should be afraid of it, I guess is the thing that probably.
I mean, can I just say, forgive me, I think that this would be a lot easier to do if we had 5 years to do it. I think my concern is that we have some very rapidly approaching deadlines in the very near term. And I think it's going to be tough for that reason. And if we had 5 years to do it, it would be a lot easier.
And that's probably a fair point, because you did that if we had longer to do it, perhaps. That sometimes when you have the time you have, as in like being in the legislature, you got to get your bill passed, you better just get with it, you know, and get things done. And I was thinking about the large data sets, kind of like, you know, we do a census in our country, and that is a lot of data. But we've managed to integrate it, to aggregate it and integrate it and disaggregate it and do all kind of things and come up with all kind of possibilities and answers. So I was just thinking, if we're looking for a model to help us understand how to handle data that is that large, I think maybe we have some models out there that could give us some guidance that scares me a lot less, I guess.
Well, I think that you're certainly right, but of course, I mean, I think of the census as basically a bunch of people with a bunch of notepads, kind of ticking off little categories and keeping lists, which is just a little bit different than determining eligibility and sending out fairly large amounts of money and determining whether different people are going to get health care or not. It's just, I mean, I certainly take your point that people have accomplished and created large bureaucratic programs before. I just want to suggest that the challenges for this one are particularly unique and particularly large.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't ask you to make those two things parallel, because there are algorithms that can have those otherwise, and they are integrated into the software, and we know that. And it's not as if you've got to take those pencils and pens. I always love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Greenburg, thank you for coming. We do have about 8 other presenters, so we're going to move on at this time.